After a long day of work, there was nothing I wanted more than a nice, relaxing shower. Under the rivulets of water, I felt the stress and tension wash off me. I stepped out of the shower, silently cursing that it was laundry day and I had no clean towels to dry off with. It wasn't really a big deal. I would drip dry and make sure that I took everything to the laundry the next day. I walked around the bedroom, letting the cool night air circulate over my body, which caused my skin to prickle. It was cold outside, but I expected the house should have been a little warmer. I would have to call the utilities and see if there might be a problem with my heating. I didn't want to sit on anything for fear of soaking it, so I decided I would lay out my clothes for the next day. I stepped into my closet and pulled the cord to turn on the light bulb that hung from the ceiling. There was a brief flash before something was illuminated that I had not prepared for. A man. In one fist, he clenched an old-fashioned straight razor. In his other hand was a roll of electrical tape and a bag of salt. There was a twisted smile plastered across his face that made his intentions very clear. I wanted to scream, but fear paralyzed my throat. I don't know what was scarier. The realization that I was in this situation stark naked, or the fact that he was too. To tell you the truth, I needed to drink. I would have a hard day at work, and I would go to the bar and let the alcohol wash away my thoughts. It was cathartic. My daughter, wife, and friends would always lay into me when I got home for stinking of alcohol. They would bitch at me, saying that I just wasn't the person they thought I was when I went out drinking, and I could be such a better person. They would always be lying in wait for me when I got home. I would walk through the door and find a group of my family and friends waiting for me. They would always ambush me with prepared letters about how my drinking made them feel, which of course was always bullshit, as they didn't give me an appropriate time to form my argument to theirs. There wasn't much I could do under their relentless assault. I'd always let them cry and rage against me. Afterwards, I would tell them I would change and find the strength to quit. A few weeks later, I would down a fifth of Jack Daniels and wash away my thoughts, and the process would begin again. They would organize another meeting, and I would keep making empty promises, because I knew it was better than the alternative. When I was sober, I'd keep imagining them on hooks, pleading and begging for sweet release. I'd imagine their flesh and how it would be so appealing to slice open, tear apart. They want me to keep drinking, but without it, I keep imagining the end. I'd imagine how they would plead, how they would taste. I think this last intervention really stuck. I feel like myself again. The entire crew gathered around the window. This time it wasn't to stare into the infinite blackness of space, or ponder the nature of their exploration. They weren't looking out. Instead, they were looking down. down at mankind finally reaping what they had sown.
A couple of months
that were
ago,
visible from space
I narrated
dotted
2 stories by tonight's fantastic
the
author.
explosion stretched up.
They went down particularly well among you all, and so I have decided to return to his
The
work.
massive mushroom cloud started.
Tonight I do something a little different. I'm bringing you a collection of very, very short
their
stories,
contribution.
each with their own nasty little kick. So, you know what to do.
Soon, the entire
Sit
world
back and
was
relax with your favorite
massive
drink,
radioactive
because it's time to
A few
listen.
hours later, there was nothing and no one left. The astronauts could only watch in a dumbfounded mix of terror and shock as their homes were lost to fallout.
After a long day of work,
Scorched earth policies
there was
brought
nothing I
destruction
wanted
for
more
decades.
than a nice, relaxing shower.
There was no one else.
Under the rivulets
only
of
them.
water, I felt the stress and
Music
tension
sliced
wash
through
off
the
me.
tension.
I stepped out of the shower,
Vera
silently
Lynn
cursing
crooned.
that it was laundry day, and I had no clean towels to dry off with.
Just like you
It wasn't really a big deal.
always do.
I would drip dry and make sure that I took everything
All it
to the
took was
laundry
one
the
man to
next
start
day.
laughing before the
I
entire
walked around the bedroom,
dissolved.
letting the cool night air circulate over my body,
Some laughed until their stomachs
which
wrapped
caused my
themselves.
skin to prickle.
Some laughed until tears.
It was
welled
cold
down.
outside, but I expected the house should
Some
have
laughed
been
even though
a
they
little
found nothing
warmer.
particularly funny.
I would have to call the utilities
They
and
continued
see
to
if there
laugh,
might be a problem with my
even
heating.
though there was
I didn't
no
want to sit on anything for fear of
that
soaking
just made
it,
them laugh.
so I decided I would lay out my clothes for the next day. I stepped into my closet and pulled the cord to turn on the light bulb that hung from the ceiling. There was a brief
When they came
flash
home to the
before
fragrance
something
of
was
the
illuminated that I had not
It
prepared
only took a
for.
few minutes of investigating to find the source.
A man.
My
In
bed
one
was covered in
fist,
vibrant
he
crimson.
clenched an old-fashioned
Made my heart
straight
skip a beat.
razor. In his other hand was a
It
roll
was
of
completely
electrical
hidden
tape
under a layer of
and a
rose.
bag of salt.
There was a candle
There
on the
was a
dresser.
twisted
Its
smile
light
plastered across his face that
I
made
am
his
yours.
intentions very clear.
I
I
love you.
wanted to
I
scream,
want to do something,
but fear paralyzed my throat. I don't
was
know
a
what was
romantic
scarier.
gesture. It
The
would be
realization
more
that I was in this
Had I not
situation
been single
stark
for the past
naked,
3 years.
or the fact that
It
he
would have been
was
romantic had
too.
the message not been written in crimson as well. Now, I can smell that iron odor in every corner of my house. And my heart
To tell you the
beats
truth,
like it is
I
about
needed
rip
to
my
drink.
chest.
I would have a hard day at work,
Only wonder
and I would go to the
what they
bar and
meant
let the
by
alcohol wash away my
wanting to do
thoughts.
something that would take my
It was cathartic. My daughter, wife, and friends would always lay into me when I got home for stinking of alcohol.
I'd been wandering around this cave.
They would bitch at me, saying that I just
I
wasn't the
couldn't
person they
separate
thought I
the
was
two.
when I
Spent
went
the
out
last
drinking,
4 hours wandering
and I
around.
could be such a better person.
I'd started the tour around 3.
They would always be lying in wait for me when I got home.
But it was
I would
around
walk through the
7
door and find a group of my family and
The sun
friends
was
waiting for me.
and the forest
They would always
become
ambush
just
me with
dark.
prepared letters about how my drinking made them
I
feel,
wandered around in the dark,
which of course was always bullshit, as they didn't give me an appropriate time
I was
to
certain
form my
that
argument to
if I
theirs.
stuck to this path,
There wasn't
I
much
would
I could do
eventually
under their
come to the
relentless
mouth.
assault. I'd always let them
After
cry
another hour
and
of
rage
bumbling
against
around in
me.
the darkness,
Afterwards,
I found my way out,
I would tell them I would
It
change
was
and
a
find
moonless
the
night.
strength to quit.
but I could see the stars. in the sky.
A few weeks later,
I
I
wept
would
with
down a
relief
fifth
as
of
I
Jack
looked up at
Daniels
those
and
beacons.
wash away my thoughts, and the process would
Found
begin again.
I watched him.
They would
wander
organize
through
another
the town of
meeting, and I would keep making empty
existence,
promises
only to reappear.
because I knew it was better than the alternative.
I watched this phenomenon
When I was
in
sober,
confusion.
I'd keep imagining them on
Few
hooks,
seconds.
pleading and begging for sweet release.
These weren't
I'd
stars.
imagine their flesh and how it would be so appealing to slice open, tear
They were
apart.
and they were drawing.
They want me to keep drinking, but without it, I keep imagining the end. I'd imagine how they would plead, and how they would taste.
Atheists,
I think this
agnostics,
last
and theologists
intervention
gathered around
really
to debate
stuck.
and quibble over the latest.
I feel like myself again.
In the farthest reaches of space, an astronomer had come across a source of pure energy. It resonated on a wavelength that seemed otherworldly.
The entire crew gathered around.
It was
the
far
window.
beyond the reaches of human engineering.
This time it wasn't to stare into the infinite blackness
The astronomer,
of space,
a devoted
or ponder the nature of their exploration.
wasted no time in gathering up the
They
media
weren't
and
looking
other
out.
like-minded scientists.
Instead, they were looking
declaring that
down.
He had discovered the existence
Down at
of God.
mankind, finally reaping what they had sown.
Atheists called it the
Detonations
inanimate
that were visible from
remnants of the
space dotted the earth.
Theologists claimed it
The
was
explosion
the embodiment
stretched
of
up as if to ensnare heaven
Agnostics
itself.
just shrugged their shoulders when asked.
The massive mushroom cloud started off in small numbers, but quickly grew
After
as
days of
more
debate,
countries attempted to make
someone
their
came up with the
contribution
idea to try
towards
and
their
make
ultimate demise.
perched on the edge of the universe.
Soon, the entire world was pockmarked with massive radioactive
They would try blasting a
mushroom
wide
clouds.
array of frequencies, languages, and
A few hours later,
in an effort
there
to
was
make
nothing.
contact,
and no one left.
they tried everything.
The astronauts could only watch in a
Atheists
dumbfounded
just
mix of terror and shock, as their homes
Theologists
were
tried
lost to
praying in an
fallout
effort to make it respond
and
to
scorched
their
earth policies brought into action decades ago.
After exhausting all strategies, the young
There was no one else. It was only them now.
He was well respected on all sides.
Music sliced through the
Probably
tension.
the best educated and
terror.
well-versed scientist in the group.
Vera Lynn crooned,
He addressed the crowd.
"Keep smiling
This
through,
is indeed God.
just like you
We have found
always
the
do."
Atheists were outraged.
All it took was one man to start
Theologians
laughing
were incensed.
before the entire crew
This was God.
dissolved.
Why was it not responding?
Some laughed until their stomachs wrapped
The
themselves
agnostic
into
man
knots.
took a second before saying,
Some laughed until tears welled up in their
"It's
eyes.
simple.
Some laughed even though they found nothing particularly funny.
God no longer cares about
They continued to laugh, even though there was no point anymore. And that just made them laugh all the harder.
We made a lot of promises, typically after making love. When we were covered with sweat,
Tonight I came home to the fragrant smell of
we would
roses.
whisper sweet nothings.
It only took a few minutes of investigating
He had
to
his
find the
arms wrapped
source
around
of the
me.
smell.
And I could still
My
feel
bed was
his
covered in a vibrant crimson color
pulled me close.
that made my heart skip a beat.
Together.
It was completely hidden under a layer of rose petals.
The car.
There was a
slammed its
candle on the
retreat
dresser,
behind.
and its light illuminated the message.
He was stopped from joining me by the steering.
I am yours, and
The
you
road
are
through
mine.
Whirling dirt.
I love
shot
you,
through
and I want to do
broken
something that will
bones.
take your breath away.
I passed out when I
It was a romantic gesture.
was alone.
It would have been more
The
romantic
ambulance must not have seen it.
had I not been single for the past 3 years.
I hobbled home, my bones sucking in.
It would have been romantic had the message not been written in crimson as well.
It took a few days.
Now, I can smell that iron odor in every corner of my
heavily
house,
medicated.
and my heart
Looked
is
sharp,
beating
see?
like it is about to rip out
It
of
was
my
my
chest.
appearance that so profoundly.
I can only wonder what they meant
My
by
blood had congealed on my mind.
wanting to do something that would take my
The
breath
wounds where
away.
my bones broke through had begun to rot. A day of travelling in the hot sun had already made me bloat up with gases from decomposition.
I'd been wandering around this cave for hours.
I was rotting.
I'd gotten separated from the tour guide and spent the last 4
He was
hours
still under the
wandering
influence of his
around in the
medication.
darkness.
But that
I'd started the tour around 3, which meant,
I sat
according to
down
my
next
internal
to him,
clock,
my putrescent,
that it was around 7 or 8.
his
The sun would be setting
as I leaned in.
and the forest would become just as dark as it was in the
My
cave.
words rattled through my broken teeth.
I wandered around in the darkness with my hand on a wall
Together.
of the cave.
Forever.
I was certain that if I stuck to this path, that I would eventually come to the mouth of the cave. After another hour of bumbling around in the darkness,
Carrie always loved
I
summer.
found my way out.
Her parents
It
would
was
go
a
out to run
moonless
errands,
night,
leaving
and
her
I
to
could see
talk
the
to boys.
stars in the sky.
Her parents didn't know about
I
it.
wept with relief as I looked
As
up
an
at
only
those
child, her
beacons
parents were
of light.
overprotective and prohibited her.
There were thousands of them up there. I watched in wonder
She,
as they winked out of
course,
existence,
decided to keep Josh in
only to
existence.
reappear seconds later.
This didn't matter.
I watched this phenomenon in
She
confusion.
loved talking to him.
It took a few seconds
voice
for me
in
to
her
come
heart
up with my answer.
Sunday was the only
These
time
weren't stars winking and blinking
not have to be worried.
into and out of existence.
It became a ritual.
They were eyes.
Every
And
Sunday
they
she
were
would
drawing closer to
They
me.
would talk until her parents got home. There was one blemish in this otherwise perfect scene. Josh's brother was noisy and would always pick up the phone and listen in
Atheists,
on their conversation.
agnostics, and theologists gathered around to debate
Harry
and
could hear his
quibble over
breathing
the
while
latest
they talked.
discovery.
He tried to breathe softly.
In the farthest reaches of space, an astronomer had come across a source of
This
pure
went on for weeks
energy.
and slowly Carrie's
It
frustration.
resonated on a wavelength that seemed otherworldly.
Josh ignored it. But
It
after
was
one
far
month,
beyond the reaches of
the
human engineering and
conversation Carrie
technology.
asked, "Could you tell your brother
The astronomer,
to buzz off?
a devoted
I can hear him
believer,
listening on the other phone line."
wasted no time in gathering up the media and other
Josh's
like-minded
answer
scientists
Sobering.
and declaring that he had discovered
We don't
the
have enough
existence
time.
of God, the
I
Creator.
thought you said you were certain your parents had gone out to run.
Atheists called it the inanimate remnants of the
Harry
Big
listened to the
Bang.
phone click onto the
Theologists
receiver
claimed it was
and
the
heard
embodiment of God.
She
Agnostics
had watched her
just
parents leave.
shrugged their shoulders when asked and
Whoever
claimed,
was in the kitchen
who knows?
wasn't her parents.
After days of debate, someone came up with the idea to try and make contact with the entity that was perched on the edge of the universe to get their answer.
Alexei stood on the bridge that overlooked the surrounding area.
They would try blasting a wide array of frequencies, languages,
He had
and
never
music
seen something
essays
so
in
wonderful.
an effort to make contact.
Off in the distance glowed an
They
ethereal
tried
blue light.
everything.
It mixed with the dusty
Atheists
twilight
cursed it
seemed
and tried to
cast an
invoke its
otherworldly
wrath.
Look on the area.
Theologists tried praying in an effort to make it
People
respond
from all over the
to
town
their
had flocked to this
supplications.
omens after hearing the news.
After exhausting all strategies, a young agnostic
They all
man
stood,
stepped up to the podium.
dumbstruck.
He was
Bathing
well
in the
respected
light
on all
emanating
sides
from the
and
landscape
was
of
probably the
strange.
best educated and well-versed scientist in the group.
Alexei felt a tugging on his pants,
He addressed the crowd.
and he looked down to see his youngest.
This
Sergei.
is indeed God.
He was 6 years old.
We have found the
Couldn't get a
Creator.
look at the radiance.
Atheists were
He was
outraged.
begging his father to boost
Theologists
him
were
up so he could get a better
incensed.
view.
If this was
He
God,
obliged with a smile on his
why was it not
face,
responding?
picked up his son, setting him on his
The
shoulder
agnostic man took a second before
to
saying,
watch the light, awestruck
It's
at the
simple.
inherent beauty of the world.
God is not responding
Alexei knew that
because
if he
God
lived to be
no
one
longer
1,000
cares about
years old,
us.
he would not see another sight that rivaled the beauty of the bluish lights intermingling in the Pripyat sky. It was April the 26th, 1986.
We made a lot of promises, typically after
Chernobyl
making love,
had suffered a catastrophic
when we were
fate.
covered with sweat and spent from our lust.
Within a
We
month,
would whisper sweet
anyone who
nothings.
went to watch that glow withered
He had his arms wrapped around me,
and died from
and I could still feel him inside me. He pulled me close, and he said it. Together, forever. The car slammed
Johnny
into a
was
tree
having
and
tough
pitched me
time
forward.
readjusting to life after the move.
He was stopped from joining me by the steering wheel.
They'd moved after Steve had lost his job.
I rolled through the woods,
The father knew it was
a whirling
difficult being
dervish
away
of
from your
bruises,
home and
broken
forced
bones,
to
and
new
blood.
friends in school. He'd
I
gone
passed
through it
out
himself when he was young,
when I awoke.
and he empathized,
I was alone.
which was why he decided to do
The
something.
ambulance must not have seen me and left me behind.
He'd just lost another one of his babies.
I hobbled home, my
Steve sat
bones
down
sucking
and
and popping
explained
lewdly out of my
talked
wound.
the tooth fairy.
It took a few
and
days,
convinced him to increase the price for
but I
teeth
finally
to
reached
$5.
him.
As Johnny had
He
been
was
such
heavily
a good
medicated. He looked
Johnny's
shocked to
eyes
see
lit
me.
up the next morning when he found
It was
$5
my
under his name.
appearance that so profoundly
He
impacted him.
excitedly talked about buying a new...
My blood had congealed on my
so he could
mottled
play
grey
poker
skin.
with his friends.
The wounds where my
Steve
bones
told him
broke
that
through had
$5
begun to rot. A day of
Mental
travelling in the
discouragement.
hot sun had already made me
planned on giving
bloat
himself
up
a
with
game
gases
of
from
When his
decomposition,
birthday rolled around,
and I looked almost pregnant.
Johnny stuck out his lip.
I was rotting from the inside out.
It was tough, see.
He was still under the influence of his
But he
medication,
didn't have the money for the system.
but that would wear off.
Johnny, however, wanted
I
it
sat
bad.
down next to him and ran my putrescent and cold hand over his
Steve
head.
woke up. to a
He
horrible
stiffened
scene.
as I leaned in close.
Johnny was at the kitchen
My words
table.
rattled through my broken
Pliers.
teeth into his ear.
Blood stained his mouth.
Together,
The front of his shirt.
forever.
In front of him were 6 tiny teeth. Steve could only watch in shock as his son angled the pliers back towards his mouth.
Carrie always
Burbled
loved
through the blood.
Sundays. Her parents would go out to run errands,
Oh,
leaving
enough.
her to call her boyfriend. Her parents didn't know about him. As an only child, her parents were overprotective and prohibited her from dating until she was 15. She, of course, decided to keep Josh's existence hidden from them. This didn't matter. She loved him. She loved talking to him. His voice set her heart aflutter. Sunday was the only time she could call him and not have to be worried about getting caught. It became a ritual for them. Every Sunday she would call, and they would talk until her parents got home. There was one blemish in this otherwise perfect scene. Josh's brother was noisy and would always pick up the phone and listen in on their conversation. Carrie could hear his breathing while they talked. He tried to breathe softly, but she could still hear him. This went on for weeks, and slowly Carrie's frustration at the situation grew. Josh ignored it, but after one particularly heated conversation, Carrie asked, "Could you tell your brother to buzz off? I can hear him listening on the other phone line." Josh's answer was sobering. "We don't have another phone in the house. I thought you said you were certain your parents had gone out to run errands." Carrie listened to the phone click onto the receiver in her kitchen. She had watched her parents leave. Whoever was in the kitchen, it wasn't her parents. Alexei stood on the bridge that overlooked the surrounding area with his mouth agape. He had never seen something so wondrous. Off in the distance glowed an ethereal blue light. It mixed with the dusky twilight and seemed to cast an otherworldly look on the area surrounding it. People from all over the town had flocked to this overlook after hearing the news of this oddity. They all stood, dumbstruck, bathing in the light that emanated from the landscape that was stretched out before them. Alexei felt a tugging on his pant legs, and he looked down to see his youngest, Sergei. He was 6 years old and couldn't get a look at the radiance. He was begging his father to boost him up so he could get a better view. He obliged with a smile on his face and picked up his son, setting him on his shoulders. The two watched the light, awestruck at the inherent beauty of the world. Alexei knew that if he lived to be 1,000 years old, he would not see another sight that rivaled the beauty of the bluish light intermingling in the Pripyat sky. It was April the 26th, 1986. and Chernobyl had suffered a catastrophic failure at its nuclear power plant. Within a month, anyone who went to watch that glow withered away and died from acute radiation poisoning. Johnny was having a tough time readjusting to life after the move. They'd moved after Steve had lost his job. The father knew it was difficult being moved from your home and forced to make new friends in a new school. He'd gone through it himself when he was young, and he empathized, which was why he decided to do something nice for him. He'd just lost another one of his baby teeth, and Steve sat down with him and explained how he had talked to the tooth fairy and convinced him to increase the price for teeth to $5, as Johnny had been such a good boy lately. Johnny's eyes lit up the next morning when he found $5 under his bed. He excitedly talked about buying a new Game Boy so he could play Pokemon with his friends. Steve told him that $5 would not be enough. He'd meant to discourage him. He planned on giving his son a Game Boy in a few months, when his birthday rolled around. Johnny stuck out his lips and pouted. It was tough seeing him like that, but he didn't have the money for the system yet. Johnny, however, wanted it now, and he had a plan. Steve woke up to a horrible scene the next morning. Johnny was at the kitchen table, with pliers in his hand. Blood stained his mouth and the front of his shirt. In front of him were 6 tiny teeth. Steve could only watch in shock as his son angled the pliers back towards his mouth and burbled through the blood, "Just 2 more, and I'll have enough." Thanks for taking the time to drop by and watch this video. You know what would make me a happy doctor? Hitting that like button, leaving a comment, and subscribing to my channel. Go on, I've got plenty more stories to tell you.